there's this phase of things that we sometimes go through. We'll call it the spiritual desert. Now, this can happen before awakening, can happen after awakening, but it feels something like this. What had previously felt like a dynamic range of emotion, like a lot of mental activity, a lot of seeking, a lot of interest in future promises and rewards. It's as if the volume on that gets suddenly turned down from 8 or 9 to 2. So things just feel calm, but kind of flat, neutral. It's typically not distressing. In fact, every time I can recall someone describing this and the times I went through it, it's never really distressing. There's not a lot of strong emotions on either side of the scale. It's much more like you feel present, relaxed, things feel neutral, but it also feels like something's falling away, or something has fallen away, and perhaps continues to fall away. Sometimes you identify specific interests or pastimes that you used to occupy yourself with that seemed interesting, but now you see them differently. They just aren't that interesting anymore. Or there seem to have been distractions. And you see this clearly now that there's not a lot of deep interest in those. They were being used to keep the dynamism going for its own sake. So you could say that the spiritual desert is this gap between when there's a big reduction in seeking energy, in preoccupation with the future, or even the past, preoccupation with problems and solutions and the narrative. When that's reduced significantly, it just seems kind of quiet, kind of neutral. Life seems like it's generally okay. Nothing seems particularly wrong, but just quieter, a bit vacant perhaps. And again, usually people don't feel distressed by this. They just notice that it's a significant departure from how they usually feel. So the way I typically describe this phenomenon is simply a phase. What you could say is that the identity, or the false identity, or the dynamic collection of processes we call the identity, has disentangled itself from a lot of the gross seeking, a lot of the larger movements in the mind. And as that disentangles, those mental processes just calm down. There's less seeking in general, there's less preoccupation in the mind. So this is why things feel calm. Identity, in a sense, has thinned out, or you're operating out of a more subtle, but perhaps a more broad, a more expansive sense of identity. But this is sort of an intermediate phase because the non-dual nature of experience, or the non-dual nature of phenomena, hasn't come forward and replaced you. So it's as if there's a sort of empty stage. It's a gap between when the false identity starts to fall away and when the false identity and its deeper roots truly do fall away. So what to do here? Well, the same as always. The presence itself is the best teacher. Whether it's sounds and sensations, whether it's consciousness, whether it's recognizing a thought as such, whether it's a breath, whether it's one footstep, whether it's that ineffable something that we can never actually talk about, which seems to sort of encompass all of it. That's the practice. Now, one thing that's nice about this stage of things is that because there's a lot less preoccupation in the mind, a lot less distraction, and more importantly, a lot less buy-in about distraction, it's easier to inquire into more subtle truths. So inquiry tends to work very well here, even though we often don't have as much behind it. The intense drive to awaken may have also quieted down with all the other agendas and seekings, and so forth. So the takeaways are, number one, this happens to almost everyone at one time or another. Number two, like anything, it's an experience. It will go. Number three, it's a sort of in-between phase, and it's a good place to inquire if you feel inclined to do so. Otherwise, just honor the presence. Just enjoy the aliveness. Enjoy the senses. Enjoy the intimacy and immediacy of raw experience.